The first time I saw her, I thought she was a waitress. It was my father's 62nd birthday dinner at a restaurant so expensive that the menu didn't have prices, just descriptions that made you feel illiterate. My father, Richard, had been divorced from my mother for 8 years, and in that time he had cycled through women the way other men cycled through cars, flashy, expensive, and replaced the moment they showed signs of wear. I had learned not to ask questions. I had learned to smile, to shake hands, to say, "Lovely to meet you," while calculating how many months she would last. But when a woman in her late 20s walked over to our table carrying a bottle of Dom Perignon, I assumed she was staff. She had that look, effortless, polished, the kind of woman who knew how to hold a tray without making it look like work. I was reaching for my water glass when my father stood up, kissed her on the cheek, and said, "Everyone, this is Priya, my fiancée." The table went silent. My younger sister, Emma, dropped her fork. My Aunt Margaret, my father's older sister, a woman who had never approved of anything he did, made a sound like a punctured tire, and I just stared. Fiancé. The word didn't compute. My father had been dating, sure, but fiancé meant intention. It meant permanence. It meant that this woman who looked young enough to be his granddaughter, was going to be my stepmother. Priya smiled. It was a beautiful smile, wide and white and perfectly calibrated. "I've heard so much about all of you," she said, and her voice was warm, accented with something I couldn't place. British, maybe, with a layer of something else underneath. "I know this is a surprise. I'm hoping you'll give me a chance." I didn't say anything. I just watched her take her seat next to my father, watched him put his hand on her knee under the table, watched her laugh at something I said that wasn't funny, and I felt something cold settle into my chest. Not anger, not yet. Something worse, clarity. I knew in that moment exactly what I was going to do. Let me tell you about my father. Richard Bennett was a self-made man in the most literal sense. He had grown up poor, the son of a factory worker and a part-time secretary, and had built a real estate empire from nothing. By the time he was 40, he owned half the commercial property in the city. By 50, he had been on magazine covers. By 60, he was worth more money than I could spend in 10 lifetimes. But money doesn't make you a good father. It makes you a provider, sure. It paid for my private school, my Ivy League education, my first car, my down payment on an apartment I didn't ask for. What it didn't pay for was presence. My father had never been to a single parent-teacher conference. He had missed every school play, every soccer game, every birthday party that wasn't convenient. When my mother left him, after 24 years of marriage, she said it was because she was tired of being married to a ghost with a black card, but a ghost all the same. After the divorce, my father didn't grieve. He rebounded, and rebounded, and rebounded. The women got younger each time. First, a 45-year-old yoga instructor, then a 38-year-old real estate agent, then a 32-year-old model who had done a campaign for a vodka brand I'd never heard of. Each time, I told myself it didn't matter. He was a lonely man. He was compensating. He was going through a phase. But Priya was 29. I was 31. Do the math. She was younger than me by 2 years. She was closer in age to my sister Emma, who was 26, than to my father. And she was going to be my stepmother. She was going to sit at the head of the Thanksgiving table. She was going to have opinions about my of life. She was going to inherit half of everything when my father died, which, given his age and his fondness for steaks and whiskey, was not as distant a prospect as he wanted to believe. That night, after the dinner ended, Emma called me. "Are you okay?" she asked. "No." "Me neither. She's our age, Julian. Our actual age." "I know. Dad is being an idiot. This is going to ruin everything. What about Mum? What about your Emma, I cut her off. "I'm going to handle it." "Handle it how?" I didn't answer, because the truth was I didn't know yet. But I had a trust fund. I had a law degree I never used. I had years of watching my father manipulate people in boardrooms and bedrooms, and I had learned from the master. If Priya thought she was marrying into easy money, She had another thing coming. She had no idea who she was dealing with. The engagement lasted 4 months. During that time, I played a role. I was the supportive son, the one who asked Priya questions about her past, her family, her ambitions. I took her to lunch, just the two of us, and listened as she told me about growing up in London, about her mother who had died when she was 18, about her father who had remarried a woman half his age. I filed away every detail like evidence. She worked in art advisory, which meant she helped rich people buy paintings they didn't understand. She had a degree from a middling university and a mountain of student debt that my father had already offered to pay off. She lived in a 1-bedroom apartment in a neighborhood that was trendy 5 years ago. She drove a leased Audi that was about to go back to the dealership. In other words, she was exactly what I expected. A woman who had traded youth and beauty for security and status. A woman who had looked at my 62-year-old father with his bad knees, his thinning hair, his 3 ex-wives, and seen not a man but a bank account. I hated her for it, but I hated my father more for making it possible. "Don't you think the age difference is a little bit much?" I asked him one afternoon, as casually as I could. We were in his study, a room lined with leather-bound books he had never read and awards he had paid someone to win for him. He looked at me over his reading glasses. "She makes me happy, Julian." "Happy? Dad, she's 29. She was born the year you bought your first building. She wasn't even alive when Reagan was president. So it's ridiculous. It's embarrassing. What do you even talk about?" He set down his pen. For a moment, I saw something flicker across his face. Not anger, but something sadder, something almost human. "We talk about the future," he said, "about travel, about what we want to do with the time I have left. She doesn't care about the past, Julian. She doesn't care about my mistakes. She just sees me, the way your mother never did." I wanted to scream. I wanted to shake him. My mother had seen him. She had seen him for 24 years, had watched him turn from a struggling entrepreneur into a mogul, had raised his children mostly alone while he chased deals and accolades. The fact that he couldn't see that, the fact that he had rewritten history to make himself the victim, was the cruelest part. Instead, I smiled. "I'm happy for you, Dad. Really. I just want to make sure you're protected." Protected from what? From the worst-case scenario. A prenup. A solid one. Something that makes sure everything you built stays in the family. He frowned. "Priya and I have talked about it. She's agreed to a prenup. But I don't want to be cruel, Julian. She's giving up a lot to be with me. Her career, her city, her independence." "She's gaining a lot too," I said. "A house, a car, an allowance. Not to mention the inheritance when you—" I stopped myself. "When the time comes." My father was quiet for a long moment. Then he nodded. "I'll have the lawyers draft something. Fair but firm." Fair but firm. Those words would come back. Cake to haunt him. The wedding was small. That was Priya's idea, or so she said. I suspected my father didn't want the public spectacle of a 62-year-old man marrying a woman young enough to be his daughter. The guest list was 40 people, mostly my father's business associates, and a handful of Priya's friends who flew in from London. My mother was not invited, which was fine. She had remarried a nice man named Gerald, who sold luxury yachts and had the emotional depth of a paddling pool. Emma was the maid of honor. She wore a dress that cost more than most people's rent and smiled so tightly I thought her face might crack. I was the best man, which felt like a joke. The best man for what? For a marriage that was doomed before it started. For a father who had never taught me how to be a good husband because he didn't know himself. I gave a speech. I kept it short. I said that my father had always been a man who knew what he wanted and went after it, and that Priya was no exception. I said I wished them happiness. I said all the things you're supposed to say while thinking all the things you're not supposed to think. After the reception, Priya found me on the terrace. She was still in her wedding dress, a simple white sheath that showed off her collarbones and her tan. She had a glass of champagne in one hand and a look on her face that I couldn't quite read. You don't like me, she said. Not a question. I don't know you. You've had plenty of chances to try. I turned to look at her. The city spread out below us, all lights and noise and ambition. Somewhere down there, people were working jobs they hated, living in apartments they couldn't afford, dreaming of the kind of life my father had built. And here was this woman, this stranger, who had walked into that life and claimed it for her own. Here's the thing, Priya, I said, keeping my voice low. I've watched women come and go for 8 years. I've watched my father fall in love, fall out of love, fall into bed, fall into court. And every single time, he's the one who walks away with everything. But not this time. This time, he's old. This time, he's vulnerable. This time, he actually believes you love him. And that makes him dangerous. Not to you, but to himself. Because when you leave, and you will leave, you're going to take half of everything, and I'm not going to let that happen. Priya didn't flinch. She took a sip of her champagne and looked out at the city. You think I'm a gold digger? I think you're a woman who knows exactly what she's doing. She laughed. It was a real laugh, not the practiced one she used at dinner parties. Your father pursued me, Julian, for 6 months. He sent flowers to my office. He showed up at my gallery openings. He flew me to Paris for a weekend and proposed in a hotel suite that cost more than my annual salary. I said no 3 times. 3 times. And then I thought, why not? Why shouldn't I have a beautiful life? Why shouldn't I be taken care of? Why shouldn't I let someone adore me? Because it's not real. It's as real as anything else. She turned to face me, and for a moment, I saw something underneath the polish. Something tired. Something lonely. You think I don't know what people say? You think I don't know that your Aunt Margaret calls me an opportunist and your sister pretends I don't exist? I know everything. But your father is kind to me, he's generous, he makes me feel safe, and maybe that's not enough for you, but it's enough for me. I wanted to believe her. For one stupid, fleeting second, I wanted to believe that this was just 2 lonely people finding each other, but then I remembered the prenup. I remembered the way she had looked at my father's watch collection. I remembered the stack of credit card statements I had found in his study, the ones from Saks, from Neiman Marcus, from stores I couldn't pronounce. You'll have to prove it, I said. Prove what? That you're not what I think you are. She smiled again, but this time it didn't reach her eyes. Challenge accepted. The first phase of my plan was simple. I became her best friend. I showed up at the house when my father was traveling. I brought her coffee. I asked about her day. I listened to her complain about the gardener, the chef, the housekeeper who kept rearranging her closet. I took her to lunch, to museums, to galleries where she could show off her expertise. I became the son she never had, the brother she wished Emma would be. It was easy. Easier than I expected. Because Priya, for all her polish, was desperately lonely. My father worked constantly. Even in retirement, he couldn't stop himself from taking calls, signing documents, flying to meetings. The house was huge and empty, and full of things that didn't belong to her. And I was there, always there, a friendly face, a sympathetic ear. Doesn't it bother you? She asked one afternoon as we sat by the pool. She was wearing a bikini that cost more than my first car. I was wearing sunglasses so she couldn't see my eyes. Doesn't what bother me? That I'm with your father, that I'm younger than you, that I'm going to be the one sitting next to him at your wedding, your children's birthdays, your... Stop! I held up a hand. I've made my peace with it. You make him happy. That's all that matters. She looked at me for a long moment. Then she reached over and touched my hand. You're a good person, Julian. Don't let anyone tell you different. I smiled. I let her hold my hand. And I thought about the dossier I had been building in my private server. Every receipt, every text message, every late-night phone call to a number in London that she didn't know I knew about. Phase 1 was complete. She trusted me. Phase 2 was about to begin. The first crack appeared 3 months into the marriage. My father had a heart attack. Not a bad one. A warning shot, the doctors said. A wake-up call. He spent 4 days in the hospital, hooked up to monitors and machines, looking smaller than I had ever seen him. Priya stayed by his side the entire time. She held his hand. She read to him. She cried when the doctors said he needed to change his diet, his lifestyle, everything. I watched her. I watched for any sign of calculation, any moment when her mask slipped. But she just sat there, holding my father's hand, looking genuinely terrified. And for a moment, just a moment, I felt a flicker of doubt. Maybe she did love him. Maybe I had misjudged her. Maybe, no. I shook it off. This was what she did. This was how she operated. She played the devoted wife, the loving stepmother, the innocent abroad, and everyone fell for it. Everyone except me. When my father was discharged, I offered to help with his recovery. I moved into the guest house, supposedly to be close by in case of emergencies, but really to keep an eye on Priya. I was there for every physical therapy session. I was there for every argument about food, about exercise, about the cigarettes he kept sneaking on the balcony. I positioned myself as the responsible son, the one who had his father's best interests at heart. Priya noticed. "You don't trust me," she said one night, after my father had gone to bed. We were in the kitchen, cleaning up the remains of a dinner she had cooked. A healthy meal, low sodium, low fat, the kind of thing my father would have sneered at 6 months ago. "I trust you to do what's best for you," I said. "That's not the same thing." "And what's best for me?" I set down the dish I was drying. Security, stability, a future where you don't have to work, where you don't have to worry, where you can spend your days buying things and going to lunches and pretending you earned any of it. Her face hardened. "You don't know anything about me. I know you called a divorce lawyer 3 weeks ago. I know you've been looking at apartments in London. I know you've been moving money into an offshore account that my father doesn't know about." The colour drained from her face. "How?" "I have access to everything, Priya. Every email, every text, every call. My father may be old, but he's not stupid. He gave me administrative access to his accounts years ago, in case something happened to him. And something did happen. He had a heart attack, and while he was lying in a hospital bed, you were planning your escape." She grabbed the counter to steady herself. "That's not... I wasn't... Those calls were... Don't." I held up my hand. "Don't lie to me. Not now. Not when I have the receipts." For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The refrigerator hummed. The clock on the wall ticked. And Priya stood there, gripping the marble countertop like it was the only thing keeping her upright. "What do you want?" she whispered. "Nothing. I don't want anything. I just want you to know that I know. And I want you to think very carefully about your next move. Because if you try to take my father for everything he's worth, if you try to leave him with nothing, I will destroy you. I will leak every text, every receipt, every late-night phone call. I will make sure every judge, every lawyer, every person in this city knows exactly who you are. Do you understand?" She nodded, slowly. Tears were forming in her eyes, but she didn't wipe them away. "Good," I said. "Now go to bed. And don't forget, I'm watching." After that, something changed. Priya stopped pretending. She still played the role of devoted wife when my father was around, but when it was just the two of us, the mask came off. She was cold, distant. She stopped accepting my invitations to lunch, stopped sitting by the pool when I was there, stopped pretending she enjoyed my company. It should have felt like a victory. Instead, it felt like a funeral. Because the truth, the ugly, uncomfortable truth that I didn't want to admit, was that I had started to like her. Not as a stepmother, not even as a person exactly, but as a presence. She was smart. She was funny when she let herself be. She had opinions about art and music and food that made me see things differently. And in the quiet moments, the moments when she forgot to perform, she was almost kind. I thought about the night my father had his heart attack. The way she had sat in the waiting room, her hands trembling, her face pale. The way she had held his hand when the doctors finally let her into his room. The way she had whispered something in his ear that made him smile despite the tubes and the wires and the beeping machines. Was that performance? Could anyone fake that? I didn't know anymore, and that was the problem. 3 more months passed. My father recovered. He went back to work, against the doctor's orders, against Priya's pleas, against everything I had tried to tell him. He was a man who didn't know how to stop, who saw every moment of rest as a moment wasted. And Priya watched him disappear back into his empire, back into his phone calls and his meetings and his late nights, and I watched her watch him. She was sad. Not the theatrical sadness she sometimes deployed at dinner parties, the kind that made people lean in and ask what was wrong, but a real sadness, a quiet one, the kind that settles into your bones and stays there. One night, I found her on the terrace alone, staring out at the city. It was 2 a.m. My father was in Singapore, or maybe Hong Kong. I had stopped keeping track. "You should be asleep," I said. "So should you." I stood next to her. The city was quieter at this hour, the lights still bright but the noise muted. Somewhere, far below, a siren wailed and faded. "He doesn't see me," Priya said after a long silence. He never did. He saw the idea of me, the young wife, the pretty accessory, the woman who would make him feel young again. But me, the actual person, he doesn't know anything about me. "Then why did you marry him?" She laughed. It was a bitter sound, nothing like the warm laugh I had heard at the wedding. "Because I was tired. Tired of working, tired of struggling, tired of watching my friends get married and buy houses and have babies while I was still renting and dating men who couldn't commit. Your father offered me a way out, a shortcut, and I took it. At the cost of your happiness. Was I happy before? I was a 29-year-old art consultant with $30,000 in debt and a boyfriend who cheated on me with his ex-wife. I wasn't happy. I was surviving. And your father..." She stopped, swallowed. "Your father made me feel like I didn't have to survive anymore, like I could just exist, and that felt like happiness, for a while." I didn't know what to say. Every word I had prepared, every argument, every accusation, suddenly felt cheap, small. She wasn't a villain. She was just a person who had made a series of bad decisions, just like my father, just like me, just like everyone. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked. "Because you already know. You've known from the beginning. You saw through me when no one else did. And I think..." She turned to face me, and in the dim light, I could see that she had been crying. "I think part of me wanted you to. Part of me wanted someone to see the truth and still be kind to me. But you weren't kind, Julian. You were strategic. You played me the way I played your father. And maybe we're not so different after all." That landed, harder than I expected. "You don't know me," I said. "I know you're afraid. I know you've been afraid your whole life, of losing your father, of losing his money, of losing the future you think you're entitled to. And I know that fear has made you cruel. The question is, what are you going to do about it?" I didn't have an answer, so I walked away. The end came on a Tuesday. My father had returned from Singapore early, unannounced. He found Priya in the study, packing a suitcase, not the Louis Vuitton set he had bought her for their honeymoon, but an old duffel bag, the kind you buy at a drugstore when you need to leave quickly. "What are you doing?" he asked. She didn't look up. "Leaving." "Leaving? Why? What did I do?" Finally, she looked at him. And for the first time since I had known her, she wasn't performing. She wasn't the devoted wife or the calculating gold digger or the lonely woman on the terrace. She was just Priya, tired, broken, done. "You didn't do anything, Richard, that's the problem. You were never here. You were always in meetings, on planes, on the phone with people who matter more than me. I married a man who promised to be present, and instead I got a ghost. A very rich ghost, but a ghost all the same." My father's face crumpled. "I can change. I'll retire. No, you won't. You don't know how. And I'm tired of pretending that you will." She zipped the duffel bag and slung it over her shoulder. "I'm not asking for anything. Not the house, not the car, not the money. I just want out." My father looked at me. I was standing in the doorway, watching. I had known this moment was coming, had in fact engineered it. The calls to the divorce lawyer, the offshore account, the texts to the number in London. I had planted every seed, watered every doubt, cultivated every fear. And now, finally, the harvest. "Julian," my father said, "did you know about this?" I could have lied. I could have said no, played the innocent son, let Priya take the fall. That was the plan. That had always been the plan. But I looked at Priya, at her red eyes, her trembling hands, her cheap duffel bag, and I couldn't do it. "Yes," I said. I knew. My father's face went through 5 emotions in 3 seconds: confusion, disbelief, anger, betrayal, and then, finally, something that looked like resignation. "Why?" "Because I thought she was using you. Because I thought she was a gold digger. Because I didn't want her to take what was ours." I paused. Because I was wrong. Priya stared at me. My father stared at me. The clock on the wall ticked. "Wrong about what?" my father asked. "About her. She's not a gold digger, she's just a woman who made a mistake. The same way you made a mistake. The same way I made a mistake." I looked at Priya. She didn't take anything. She didn't ask for anything. She just wanted to be seen, and none of us saw her. Not you, not me, not anyone. Priya's lip trembled. For a moment, I thought she was going to cry. But she didn't. She just nodded, once, and walked past me out the door. My father didn't stop her, neither did I. She left that night, took a cab to the airport and a flight to London and never came back. The divorce was finalised 6 weeks later. She asked for nothing, not alimony, not a settlement, not even the jewellery my father had given her. She just wanted her name back, her life back, herself. My father didn't understand it. He kept waiting for the other shoe to drop, for the lawyer's letter, for the demand for millions. When it never came, he sank into a kind of bewildered sadness. He had spent his whole life expecting the worst from people, and Priya had given him the best. Her absence, her silence, her refusal to take anything that wasn't freely given. And me? I moved out of the guest house. I stopped monitoring my father's accounts. I started seeing a therapist, a quiet woman with grey hair who listened to my story, and then, get a question that has haunted me ever since. Why did you want her to leave so badly? I had 100 answers ready, because she was too young, because she was after his money, because she didn't love him, because she was a threat to the family, because. But none of them were true. Not really. The truth was simpler, and uglier, and harder to admit. I wanted her to leave because she reminded me of everything I was afraid of becoming. Alone, desperate, willing to trade authenticity for security, willing to love someone not because they were right for me, but because they were there, because they chose me, because they made me feel for one fleeting moment like I wasn't the ghost my father had raised me to be. Priya wasn't the villain. Neither was my father. Neither was I. We were just 3 people, standing in a house full of expensive things, trying to figure out how to be less alone. 6 months after she left, I received a postcard. It was from London, a black and white photo of the Thames, the kind you buy at a souvenir shop near the London Eye. On the back, in handwriting I recognised, were 4 words. I hope you're okay. No return address, no phone number, no invitation to respond. I kept the postcard for a week, reading it every night before bed. Then I put it in a drawer with other things I couldn't throw away but couldn't look at every day. My therapist asked me what I would say to her, if I could. I thought about it for a long time. I'd say I'm sorry, I told her. Not for what I did, although I am sorry for that, but for not seeing her, for assuming the worst, for treating her like a threat instead of a person. And what would you want her to say back? I smiled. It was a sad smile, the kind that comes after you've cried all the tears you have. I'd want her to say she's okay, that she's happy, that she found someone who sees her, that she's not surviving anymore, she's living. And would that be enough? I thought about the postcard in my drawer, the 4 words she had written, the way she had signed nothing, Not her name, not a heart, not even an initial. Yeah, I said. That would be enough. My father died 3 years later. It wasn't the heart attack that got him. It was a stroke, sudden and massive and senile, in the middle of a board meeting. He was 75 years old, still working, still chasing, still refusing to rest. Emma and I flew to the hospital, but he was gone before we landed. The funeral was large, hundreds of people, most of whom I had never met, business associates, politicians, celebrities, people who had known my father in ways I never would. They gave speeches about his vision, his drive, his legacy. They called him a titan, a legend, a man who had changed the face of the city. I stood at the back of the church and thought about Priya. I thought about the night she left. The way she had looked at me, not with anger, not with hatred, but with something worse. Pity. She had pitied me, and at the time I had resented her for it, but now, standing in the shadow of my father's monument to himself, I understood. She had seen what I couldn't, that my father had never really been there, that he had spent his whole life building an empire to distract himself from the one thing he couldn't buy, someone to truly love him. And I had spent my whole life trying to protect that empire, not realizing that I was protecting an emptiness. After the funeral, Emma and I went through his things. The will was straightforward. Everything split evenly between us with a few charitable bequests to organizations I had never heard of. No mention of Priya. No mention of any of the women who had come before her. In a box in the back of his closet, I found something unexpected. A photograph. Not of me or Emma or my mother or any of the business associates who had filled his church. It was a photo of Priya taken on their honeymoon. She was standing on a beach somewhere, the sun behind her, her hair blowing across her face. She was laughing, not the practiced laugh I had heard at dinner parties, a real one, the kind that makes you feel like everything might be okay. On the back, in my father's handwriting, were 3 words. She saw me. I put the photograph back in the box. I closed the lid, and I walked out of the house that had never felt like a home, not once, not for any of us. I don't know where Priya is now. I never looked her up. I never tried to find her. The postcard is still in my drawer. The photograph is still in my father's closet, and I am still in therapy, still trying to figure out who I am when I'm not protecting something. But I think about her sometimes, on quiet nights, when the city is asleep and the lights are low. I think about the woman who was my age, who married my father, who left with nothing, who saw through all of us and still had the grace to ask if I was okay. I never answered her postcard. I never will. But if I could, I would write back. I'm getting there. I hope you are too.